Not every airplane America built in World War II was a hero. Some became legends. Others turned into nightmares for the men who had to fly them. A few were too advanced for their own good. Others were already obsolete the day they left the factory floor. And some sparked debates that still echo today. Was it brilliance or just plain bad judgment? In the heat of war, when lives hung in the balance, these machines divided pilots, generals, and even historians. So tonight, we're counting down the 10 most controversial American airplanes of World War II. Which ones do you remember? And which still stir debate even after 80 years? Bell P-39, Airacobra. When the Bell P-39 Airacobra rolled out in 1939, it didn't look like any other American fighter. Instead of a front-mounted engine, Bell engineers tucked the Allison V-1710 behind the pilot's seat, running a long drive shaft forward to spin the propeller. On paper, it was bold. The P-39 carried a heavy punch, a 37mm cannon firing straight through the propeller hub, designed to smash enemy bombers with a single hit. But there was a problem. The Airacobra lacked a turbocharger, which meant it gasped for breath above 15,000 feet. American and British pilots quickly soured on it, finding it sluggish in climbs and no match for a Messerschmitt 109, a Spitfire, or a Japanese Zero at altitude. Many dismissed it as a failure. And yet, on the Eastern Front, the story was very different. The Soviet Union loved the P-39. In the brutal, low-altitude dogfights over Russia, the Airacobra's firepower and rugged airframe were deadly. Some of the highest-scoring Soviet aces racked up victories in P-39s. So was the Airacobra a flop or a hidden hero? In America, it's remembered as a disappointment. In Russia, it's still remembered as a lifesaver. 80 years later, the debate hasn't ended. Bell P-63, Kingcobra. The P-63 Kingcobra was Bell's answer to the criticism heaped on the earlier P-39. Rolled out in 1943, it looked nearly identical at first glance, but inside it carried a stronger Allison V-1710 engine and refinements meant to fix the Airacobra's biggest flaw, its lack of high-altitude performance. On paper, the improvements were solid. The Kingcobra climbed better, flew faster, and still packed that same fearsome 37mm cannon firing through the propeller hub, backed up by wing-mounted machine guns. But by the time it arrived, the U.S. Army Air Forces had already moved on. Mustangs and Thunderbolts dominated the skies, and there was little interest in bringing another mid-engine fighter into the lineup. The Kingcobra was quietly sidelined, with thousands sent overseas under Lend-Lease to America's ally, the Soviet Union. That decision created its own controversy. Some American pilots argued the Kingcobra was wasted potential, a better version of the P-39 that never got the chance to prove itself in U.S. service. Meanwhile, Soviet pilots flew it with success, using its heavy firepower at low and medium altitudes, much like they had with the P-39. In the end, the Kingcobra became the forgotten fighter in American memory, dismissed at home but remembered abroad as a dependable workhorse. Its legacy still sparks debate, overlooked gem, or simply an upgrade that came too late. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. At the outbreak of World War II, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was America's workhorse. More than 13,000 were built, making it one of the most common fighters of the war. Yet from the very start, the P-40 carried a reputation problem. Compared to the sleek German Messerschmitt 109 or the nimble Japanese Zero, the Warhawk was slower, climbed poorly, and struggled above 15,000 feet. Critics called it outdated almost the moment it entered combat, and yet in the right hands, the P-40 could shine. Its rugged airframe and simple systems made it tough, dependable, and easy to maintain in the harshest conditions. Nowhere was that more evident than in China, where the American volunteer group, The legendary Flying Tigers used P-40s with their iconic shark mouth paint to devastating effect. Fighting at low and medium altitudes, they proved the Warhawk could be a deadly opponent, especially in diving attacks. This contrast made the P-40 one of the most hotly debated fighters of its day. To some, it was second-rate, a stopgap until better machines arrived. To others, it was a savior, holding the line in the dark early months of the war. Today, the Warhawk's legacy remains a paradox, dismissed by many, but remembered with pride by those who saw it carry the fight when America needed it most. Brewster F2A Buffalo. When the Brewster F2A Buffalo took to the skies in 1937, it carried the weight of high expectations. It was the U.S. Navy's first all-metal monoplane fighter, a leap forward from biplanes that still lingered on carrier decks. Compact and simple, the Buffalo promised to modernize naval aviation. For a brief moment, it looked like the future, but reality came quickly. By the time America entered the war, the Buffalo was already outclassed. Lightly armed and underpowered, it lacked speed, maneuverability, and durability. Against the nimble Japanese Zero, it was hopeless. U.S. Navy and Marine pilots who flew it at Midway paid a terrible price. Survivors branded it a disaster, and the plane was pulled from frontline duty almost as soon as it had arrived. And yet, halfway around the world, the same airplane told a very different story. In Finland, the Buffalo became a star. Finnish pilots flew it against Soviet aircraft with remarkable success, racking up kill ratios that made some aces household names. That contrast turned the Buffalo into one of the most controversial fighters of the war. In American memory, it's often mocked as a failure. In Finnish memory, it's remembered as a lifesaver. Was the Buffalo truly a bad airplane, or simply the wrong airplane in the wrong war? Douglas TBD Devastator. When the Douglas TBD Devastator entered service in 1937, it looked like a revolution for naval aviation. It was the Navy's first all-metal torpedo bomber, equipped with a radio, an enclosed cockpit, and retractable landing gear. Compared to the cloth and wire biplanes it replaced, the Devastator seemed futuristic, a machine built to define the next era of carrier warfare. But technology moves fast, and war moves faster. By 1942, the Devastator was already hopelessly out of date. Its top speed barely reached 200 miles per hour, and it struggled to defend itself with light armament. Against modern Japanese fighters like the Zero, it was simply outclassed. The controversy came to a head at the Battle of Midway. In one of the most disastrous missions in U.S. naval history, nearly every Devastator launched was shot down before reaching its target. Crews went to their deaths knowing they had little chance of survival. In the aftermath, pilots bitterly nicknamed it a flying coffin. The Devastator stands today as a harsh reminder of how quickly combat can turn cutting-edge technology into scrap metal. Once hailed as a marvel, within 5 short years, it had become a tragic symbol of obsolescence in the face of a rapidly changing war. Consolidated B-24 Liberator. No American bomber was built in greater numbers than the Consolidated B-24 Liberator. More than 18,000 rolled off the lines during World War II, serving in every theater and carrying the war deep into enemy territory. With its long, slender wing and spacious bomb bay, the Liberator could haul a heavier payload and fly farther than the more famous B-17 Flying Fortress. On paper, it looked like the superior machine. But ask the men who flew it, and you'll hear another story. Pilots often cursed the B-24. Its Davis wing was efficient but unforgiving, making the plane hard to handle. The narrow fuselage left little room to move, and crews dreaded trying to escape through its cramped interior if the bomber went down. Worse still, the Liberator had a reputation for catching fire more easily than the B-17, earning it a darker reputation among airmen. And yet, despite the complaints, the B-24 was indispensable. It flew missions from Europe to the Pacific, patrolled oceans, and even ferried supplies. For better or worse, it was everywhere. Today, the Liberator remains a paradox. A bomber that helped win the war, but rarely won the affection of those who flew it. A reluctant hero, effective, essential, but never beloved. Lockheed P-38. Lightning. When the Lockheed P-38 Lightning first appeared in 1941, it looked like nothing else in the sky. With its twin-boom design and central nacelle, it seemed futuristic, and Lockheed promoted it as America's superfighter. Powered by two Allison engines, the Lightning could climb hard, hit over 400 miles per hour, and carry concentrated firepower in its nose, a 20-millimeter cannon backed by 4.50 caliber machine guns. On paper, it was a wonder. In practice, the results depended on where you flew it. Over Europe, the P-38 struggled. Compressibility problems plagued pilots in dives, and the cold, damp conditions caused constant engine troubles. Many U.S. airmen came to dislike the Lightning, calling it unforgiving and difficult to handle compared to Mustangs or Thunderbolts. But in the Pacific, the story was entirely different. There, the P-38's long range made it invaluable across vast stretches of ocean, and its twin engines gave pilots a margin of safety. Lightning pilots shot down thousands of Japanese aircraft, including Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's bomber in 1943, one of the war's most famous missions. The P-38 remains one of World War II's most polarizing fighters. In Europe, it was a disappointment. In the Pacific, it was a hero. Love it or hate it, no one could ignore it. Boeing B-29, Superfortress. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress was the most advanced bomber of World War II, and also the most expensive. Introduced in 1944, the program cost over $3 billion, more than the Manhattan Project itself, equal to roughly $50 billion today. It was a gamble on technology that pushed the limits of what aviation could do. The B-29 featured pressurized crew compartments, something no other bomber had at the time, along with remote-controlled gun turrets and a massive range that allowed it to fly from bases as far away as the Marianas Islands straight to Japan. Its four Wright R-3350 radial engines delivered enormous power, but came with a frightening flaw. They were prone to overheating and catching fire. Many crews feared the airplane as much as the enemy. And then came the greatest controversy of all. In August 1945, B-29's Enola Gay and Bockscar dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For some, the missions ended the war and saved countless lives. For others, they marked a dark turning point in human history. The B-29 remains one of the most debated airplanes ever built, a triumph of American engineering, and at the same time, a lasting symbol of destruction on a scale the world had never seen before. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. When the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt appeared in 1942, it was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. At over 17,000 pounds loaded, it dwarfed the sleek Spitfires and nimble Mustangs that shared the skies. Many pilots looked at its bulk and scoffed, calling it too big, too heavy, and too slow to be a true dogfighter. But under the hood sat the mighty Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp radial engine, paired with a turbocharger that gave the Jug, as it was nicknamed, tremendous speed in a dive and excellent performance at high altitude. Wrapped in thick armor and armed with 8.50 caliber machine guns, the P-47 proved devastating as a ground attack aircraft, shredding trains, tanks, and convoys across Europe. Pilots who first doubted it soon learned to trust it with their lives. The Thunderbolt could take hits that would bring down most fighters, limp home with holes in the wings, and still land safely. Many airmen credited the Jug with saving them when nothing else could. The P-47's story is one of transformation, from a plane mocked as too clumsy to a beloved flying tank that earned deep respect. Few fighters went from hated to cherished as completely as the Thunderbolt. Northrop XP experimental fighters, XP-54/XP-55/XP-56. In the early 1940s, American designers weren't afraid to dream wild. Northrop and other companies built a trio of experimental prototypes that looked more like science fiction than real airplanes. These XP series fighters promised revolutionary ideas, but delivered only frustration. The XP-54 Swooze Goose was a monster of a plane, with a cockpit that tilted down for the pilot to enter, and an advanced high-power engine that never really worked as intended. The XP-55 Ascender flipped convention on its head with a canard layout and rear-mounted wings, earning the nickname Ass-Ender after dangerous handling killed a test pilot. Then there was the XP-56 Black Bullet, a stubby magnesium-bodied tailless design that looked like a flying saucer. It too ended in failure. Together, these aircraft became notorious. None reached production. All suffered from deadly flaws, crashes, or underperforming engines. Critics called them a waste of wartime resources, experiments that should have stayed on the drawing board. And yet, others argue they were bold steps, risky but necessary for pushing aviation forward. While the XP fighters never fought in combat, their radical concepts foreshadowed the jet age and Northrop's later work with flying wings. They remain symbols of World War II's strangest gamble, when America asked, "What if?" and built planes that looked like tomorrow, even if they never made it past today. Looking back, one lesson stands out. Controversy doesn't make a plane forgettable. If anything, it makes it unforgettable. The P-39 was hated in America, but loved in Russia. The B-24 carried more bombs than the B-17, yet crews cursed it as a death trap. The B-29 ended the war, but left the world forever divided. These weren't just machines of steel and rivets. They were stories of risk, failure, and sometimes redemption. Now it's your turn. Which of these airplanes do you think was the most controversial? Or did we leave one off the list? Share your memories in the comments. And if this trip back through aviation history brought something back for you, hit that like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we've got plenty more stories of America's most unforgettable warbirds still to come.